say, I leave, I want you more of my bola. She said she want my touch, all over. It's over. Game over, it's over. Every night she says she want to come sleep over.
This is Sleep Over by Millie May. Very amazing record. If you've not listened to this song, go and listen to it. I'm going to leave a link below so you can listen to it. And today we are going to do the mix breakdown for this record. As usual, I'm going to walk you through my process and hopefully you can pick up one or two things that you can use in your own record or mix or song. Whichever one. Anyways, let's jump right into it real quick, okay? By the way, my name is Benny McCauley. If this is your first time coming to the channel, and make sure you like and subscribe if you get something from this. All right, so let's get started. If you've seen any of my mix breakdowns, you know I like to start with session organization, and typically that is what we are going to start with. This was a very quick and easy song to actually mix. As you can see, there's not a lot of elements to this record, but as far as session organization goes, I have the drums up top and then followed by the bass and then the melodies and then the vocals, right? And then within the vocal folder, we have the lead and then we have the background vocals. This is how I like to organize my sessions because I can look away and come back and know where everything is, okay? And I like to correspond that folder arrangement with my group arrangement as well. So we have all tracks and this contains all the tracks, right? We have instrumental, right? If I close this folder now, you see that all the instrumentals are within this instrumental folder. Anyway, session organization is pretty much straightforward. It's basically you just arranging your session in a way that works best for you so that you can navigate through your session very quickly. So let's just start from the drums and let's look at what we are doing. So the first thing we have here, obviously, is the kick. Typically, what I like to do first is gain staging. Gain staging is the most important part of mixing, in my opinion, because if you have a very hot signal going into the rest of your processing, your mix is going to sound bad, no matter what you do to the mix. So we have trim plugin here to start with. This is how I like to do my gain staging with a trim plugin. But typically, you can get similar results with clip gain. Personally, I just prefer using the trim plugin. And again, what we are focusing on with this is the pre-fader level of this signal. We are trying to make sure our pre-fader level is not too hot going into the rest of our processing. And as you can see, this kick is peaking at -12 dB. If you're not very experienced with mixing and mastering, I would say leave your levels around -18 to -17. I personally can break all the rules. Technically, there are no rules, but I can break all the rules because I'm used to this process, all right? If you're not, I would say leave your levels between -18 and -17 or maximum -15 dB because that way you have enough headroom for whatever it is you want to do in your mix, okay? From there, what else are we doing? We have EQ to just carve out a space. Pass filter here up to 31 Hertz this time around. Funny enough, recently I realized that I prefer the sound of the low shelf for bass and kicks. I realized that it actually makes the low end sound very, very tight and controlled. That's my new move, but this was what I used to do before, and I think this sounded good, obviously, but in my opinion, doing the low shelf makes the kick sound just a little better. For example, let's do a quick comparison. I'm going to do a low shelf here, -12 dB cut. From my experience, that sounds very, very good. This is fine, and then let's listen to this.
She said,
Just gonna solo the kick real quick. Right, that's with the low shelf and with the high pass filter, right? I mean, obviously I mixed the song with this and I was able to get a great sounding low end, but in my opinion, the low shelf actually sounds way better. I don't know, it just sounds tighter to me. But again, something like this will be based on personal taste. But for this record, this is what we're doing. We've done a high pass here just to round off that low end. And if we go down the rest of the tracks, we're doing the same thing. As you can see, gain staging here to like turn down the level of the snare so we can get some headroom. Right, again, we are peaking at what, -10 dB. Listen, I am breaking all the rules on this record, man, but this is also because I understand the process and I felt like there's not a lot of instruments in this record and I have enough headroom to do what I want to do. But to be honest, the best way is to keep your levels around -18 to -15, trust me. We have the EQ here again to carve out space for the snare.
She said,
you know, I've mentioned this many times. You really just want to make sure you're not cutting into the sound. That's very important. And by doing this, you know, you're reserving this frequency range for all the other elements that need to sit around this frequency range. This is actually very, very important when you're mixing, you know. It helps you create separation within the instrument on a frequency level, even before you do the actual level adjustment of each element of the record.
say I live.
So yeah, so it's the same thing going down, gain staging and carving out space. Some of these tracks you can see that I am not doing any gain staging per se in terms of like controlling the levels. I'm doing the same thing for all the instruments, so I'm not going to go through every single one of them. But typically once I'm done with my gain staging and EQing to carve out space, I will route all the drums to my drum bus, as you can see down here, and then I'll do a send from each individual track to my parallel compression bus. But you can actually do this from the bus itself, so which means you could just do a send from your main drum bus to the parallel drum bus. I just like to do this, maybe because I'm used to it, or maybe because it makes it easy for me to show you something like this. Right, I can actually show you what the parallel compressor sounds like. Now if I did a send from here, I would not be able to do that, at least in Pro Tools anyways. That's just the reason I do that. So let's move on to the bass. This is a very, very nice sounding bass. This beat is actually very dope. This beat was produced by Blue. Amazing, amazing producer, man. The guy's sick. Again, gain staging, turn down the levels just a little bit to create headroom. So you see that we're picking up minus 15.7 dB there. As usual, we're doing a high pass to round off that low end. And I'm doing a high pass up to, let's say 20 Hz. What else do we have here? We have saturation. So I'm doing a bit of saturation here just to saturate those higher bass frequencies so the bass can cut through a little bit more when you listen to it on phones, you know, or your laptop speaker and stuff like that. This is actually a mid-side saturator, as you can see. And I've set the drive to 9. Gain is set at unity here. Pushing the XL to about 36% here, you know. Just to get some more grit into that bass. And for the mid-high, sometimes just putting the saturation plugin on the bass can actually improve the sound just a little bit, you know. So I'm not doing much there anyways. But let's take it off so we can hear the difference. So before, right, you can hear it's a bit dull, but with the saturation on, yeah, just a little bit more grit to the bass, you know, but that little bit goes a long way. So let's move on to the melodies. Again, same process, gain staging. So we have this piano here and we are picking at minus 15.6 dB there. So again, gain staging, and then we have this EQ just to carve out space for the piano. There's a bit of resonant frequencies that I can actually hear on this though, but nothing so bad to the point where I want to like take them off. I'm pretty sure on some other instrument I was taming some resonant frequencies there, but on this one, no, nothing there, because I like the way that sounded, you know, and it's not clashing with any other instrument in the mix per se. And just like everything else, gain staging, and where I felt like I needed to trim, I trim, and where I don't think I need to trim, I don't trim. As you can see, I'm not doing any trimming for these instruments, right? Yeah, this one's already at minus 18 there. With this record, man, I can assure you that I am breaking all the rules. But I'm also making sure that no matter what happens, I have enough headroom to do what I want to do. You know, I'm making sure that there's no track on this record that is clipping on the pre-fader level. You know, again, just carving out space. Yeah, for this guitar, as you can see, I'm taming some resonant frequencies here actually. Right? You know, the point of this is to make sure you get a cleaner sound. For example, let's do a quick A-B. So without the EQ. And then with the EQ. Right? A much cleaner sound. Let's do a quick A-B again in the context of the full mix bypass. You can hear how it sounds a bit muddy. It sounds a lot cleaner and more defined. Basically, this is actually how I make my decisions on when to tame resonant frequencies. So I listen in the context of the mix, and then I figure out what to pull out to create space for the other instrument, or to make sure that everything blends together perfectly. So yeah, again, same process. Once I'm done EQing and gain staging, I move everything to my melody bus, and that's where I'm doing the compression, right?
She say, I live, I want you more.
As you can see, I typically don't exceed -1 dB of gain reduction. Again, the purpose of this is just to sort of glue that section of the record together. And by that section, I mean the melodies. And based on my experience, I realized that you get a much transparent sound when you split your compression into sort of like the drums, the bass, and the melodies. Most of the work you would do for your mixing and mastering would come from just your normal leveling of the individual elements of the song, to be honest. As far as you have decent headroom, your mix is going to sound clean. Okay, that's like the first step. And then you EQ to carve out space for each instrument within the mix, and tame some of this competing resonant frequencies that might be competing with other instruments in the song, and you are good. And again, if you notice, I'm not taming resonant frequencies in all the instruments, right? I'm only taming on the particular instruments that I think would benefit from that. This particular EQ move is something that I've done so that the piano will have more clarity and the muted guitar also will have more clarity, right? Because we notice the fundamental frequency of the muted guitar is actually sitting around the same frequency range, which is around 237, right? Let's check that out. As you can see, right? So you have to tame resonant frequencies on some instruments to create space for other instruments to shine within the mix, essentially. And if I should bypass that EQ move on the piano, you're going to hear the difference. So let's take out the EQ. Not so bad, but this is going to take it a step further. You can hear how clean that sounds now, right? So this is the reason why I tame resonant frequencies. And on certain parts of the record where frequencies are not clashing or masking each other, then I wouldn't do something like that. I'll just only level out the instrument and make the sound that we want to get the attention louder, basically.
She said, I leave, I want you more of my bola.
Yeah, so that's everything I'm doing for the instrumentals. As you can see, it's very straightforward. So let's move on to the vocals. And with the vocal processing, I like to do most of the process in the vocal bus. As you can see, on the main track itself, we just have the trim plugin to do gain staging. Make sure we have headroom to work with.
She said, I leave, I want you more of my bola.
So as you can see, I'm actually doing a boost up to 4 dB with the trim plugin to pull up the pre-fader level. I think it was very, very low, and then I pulled it up to -14 dB. Typically, again, I would recommend that you stay within -18 to -15 if you are not very sure of what you're doing or if you're just starting out mixing. But from experience, I know -14 will work if I am working on a record that doesn't have a lot of elements to it. You understand? That doesn't have a lot of tracks, basically. So that's why I'm not too bothered here about that. And then another thing I do on the main track is the pitch correction. And for this, I'm using this UAD Auto Tune Real-Time Advanced. I actually like the sound of this auto tune. It's very, very transparent.
She said, I leave, I want you more.
I usually like to set the retune speed to 10 and the flex tune to 10 as well. This setting always just works. And when I play the song, you can hear that the pitch correction is very, very active, but it's still clean enough to the point where the artist doesn't sound robotic.
She said, I leave, I want you more of my bola.
Very, very nice. And then the rest of the processing typically happens in the lead vocal bus, as you can see. So let's do a quick walkthrough down the vocal chain. The first plugin we have here is the NS1 noise suppressor to, target some noise. This is just part of my chain, but, there's no noise on this recording per se. So I'm really not doing anything with this, as you can see. Also, I mixed this song a while back. That's why I'm still using the NS1 here. I've actually stopped using this. I now prefer to use the Clarity VX Pro. It's also a Waves plugin. It's actually quite amazing. And by the way, if you want to get any Waves plugin, man, I'm going to drop a link below that you can use to get Waves plugins and get huge discounts. Trust me, all right? And then the next plugin here is the Catch Off EQ. And with this, I'm just taming resonant frequencies in the vocals. As you can see, I'm not doing so much at all. It's usually just like maybe -2 dB here, -2 dB. And this is also dynamic, so which means the EQ would not attenuate those frequencies except they exceed the threshold which I've set here. Very, very important, because you don't want to do too much. You just want to focus on those whistling or annoying frequencies that are really, really, really bad for the record. Like, let's see.
She said, I leave, I want you more.
You hear that? That's something that we don't need in the record.
I leave, I want you more.
So something like that will take that out. Okay, so that's essentially what this is doing. If I bypass this, for example, you'd actually hear the difference that it makes. So let's do that.
She say I leave, I want you more.
And then with it,
she say I leave, I want you more of my boiler.
you can hear how it immediately makes the vocal sounds a lot cleaner. Simple move, but very effective. And then the next plugin here is the de-esser. I like to use Nectar DS, but you can use any de-esser, to be honest.
She say I leave, I want you more of my boiler.
I'm doing up to, is that -5 dB?
She say I leave,
What?
She say I leave, I want you more of my boiler.
So I'm doing up to -5 dB of reduction there, which is actually not bad. And then the next plugin here is the SSLE channel strip. This is where I start to shape the tone of this vocal. This is actually a very, very important plugin in the vocal chain. And if you don't have this UAD one, you can use the SSLE V2 from Waves. I really like that because it gives you similar sound, as well as the option of having a black and a brown EQ type, which is really cool. So basically what I'm doing with this is quite simple. I'm doing a boost around 16K up to, we can call that, let's say 1 or 2 dB. This UAD emulation of the SSLE channel strip don't have set numbers per se. You have a range, but you don't have numbers. So which means you have to kind of listen with your ears and make sure the adjustments you are making is what you want to make, which is something that I like. Kind of forces you to mix with your ears as well as your eyes, you know, which is quite important. High mid frequency, I'm doing a cut around say -2, around 3 kilohertz to target harshness in the vocals. And this is a wide bell, as you can see. For the low mid frequency, we're doing a cut around, we can call this 750-ish kilohertz, up to maybe -14 there to tame that whole boxiness in the vocals. Right, let me actually show you what that sounds like.
She say I leave, I want you more,
right?
Want you more of my boiler.
So that's what we're taking out.
She say she want my touch.
If you want to get a professional sounding vocal, this is actually one frequency range that you always attenuate, because a lot of mics, unfortunately, we add that boominess in your recording. But I'm doing a tight Q here, and then to the low frequencies we're doing a cut up to, again, say -14, around 200 hertz. Let's bypass again so we can hear the difference that this is making. So bypass.
She say I leave, I want you more of my boiler.
And then with the plugin,
she say I leave, I want you more of my boiler.
I really love how this EQ actually makes the vocals sit properly in the mix and still have that clarity and presence. It's actually quite amazing. So let's go back to the next plugin, which is the 1176 compressor. I like to compress in series. This is the first compressor. This is basically just here to tame picks.
She say I leave, I want you more of my boiler.
See that when you get to the quiet parts of his performance, like the one team of my bola, you don't get any compression happening there. This is just to catch picks, okay? But let's look at the settings real quick. So I have the attack set to slow so that some of the transient can pass through. Actually, a lot of the transient will pass through with this. By the way, this is the revision AE version of this compressor, which also has the slow mode. The slow mode brings down the attack time to around 10 milliseconds essentially. And then the release is very, very fast. Ratio typically 4:1, and that's about it. This compressor has a fixed threshold, so the more input you drive in, the more compression you get, and then you set your output to taste. And then the next plugin on the chain is the C6. This is also very important to the tone of the vocal. Let's do a quick A/B so we can hear that. Bypass.
She say I leave, I want you more of my boiler.
And then with it,
she say I leave, I want you more of my boiler.
this is basically keeping the vocals very, very tight by compressing all of the problem frequencies. I'm going to leave a link up here on how you can do this from scratch. It's very, very easy, and it works with any multiband compressor you have if you don't have the C6. The only thing that I would say differentiate this from maybe the FabFilter multiband compressor and any other ones, the fact that this has this behavior that lets you select the kind of behavior you want the C6 to have. I've currently set it to opto, which means it will behave like an opto compressor. Slow attack and program dependent release, so you have a much more natural sounding vocal. Opto is great for vocals, by the way, so That's essentially, why I've set the behavior to up to here. So that's that. And then the next compressor here is the LA2A compressor. Again, if you don't have the UAD one, you can use the CLA2A by Waves or any other opto compressor that you might have actually. The purpose of this is to actually even out the performance of the vocals some more. So this is where I'm doing the heavy lifting in terms of compression for the vocals. Typically, I'm usually aiming for like -3 dB to -5 dB of gain reduction. Then I set my gain to taste. So let's see what we're doing here.
She say, I leave, I want you more of my bola.
Right.
She say she want my touch, all over.
So you can see at the very, very top of this performance there, we're hitting -3 dB. But sometimes I might go down to -5. I want a more compressed sounding vocal. This is a very, very nice compressor. It really helps to thicken the vocal and bring it to the front of the mix. If I bypass this now, you hear the difference, see? You almost cannot hear the vocal, but with the compressor on.
She say, I leave, I want you more of my bola.
So essentially, I'm using this compressor as a very, very, very important amplifier for the vocals. A lot of people don't know this, but this is one way to really get your vocals to sit in the mix. Do you understand? You don't have to struggle too much because the gain is actually very, very transparent. You don't get distortion even when you push it, which is very, very good. So that's something for you to try. All right. Okay, so the next plugin on the vocal chain, which will be the last plugin before we head to the time-based effects, is the SPL DSR. This is what I use to sort of control the warmth or brightness of the vocal essentially. Currently, I've set the DSR to mid, but typically I like to do mid side so that I'm DSing both the mid and the side frequencies of the vocal essentially. The sides are essentially the higher frequencies basically. Again, this is what I'm using to control any sibilance I would have built up due to all of the processing we've done, and also just be like the last thing that I use to control the warmth or brightness of the vocal. So if an artist says they want their vocals to be brighter, for example, I can just reduce the S reduction.
She say, I leave, I want you more of my bola.
Right, and they say I want to be warmer, then I increase the S reduction.
She say, I leave, I want you more.
And even at this level, if the artist still decides they want more warmth, I can then now activate the sides as well.
She say, I leave, I want you more of my bola.
Right, you can hear that when I activate the sides, it becomes even warmer. And then from here, we go into the time-based effect. Time-based effect is very straightforward. We have 3 sends going to our respective aux tracks. We have the room reverb going to the pure plate. Room reverb, you just want a little bit to just latch with the vocals and sort of serve as a cushion between the vocal and the instrumental, right? And then we have our main reverb, and that's going to the H reverb here. And then we have the stereo delay, which is going to our stereo delay aux track, which has a comeback kit. This is still my favorite delay for vocals at this time, and that's mainly because it has this Docker feature. So instead of doing sidechain compression to sort of control the delay, I can just turn this on, and when the vocal is playing, the delay plugin is going to do the sidechain for me and dock the delay effect onto the vocal stops playing essentially. I have this set to quarter note straight, ping pong. Yeah, it's a very, very nice delay to be honest. So for the reverb, as you can see, I'm doing this sidechain compression here so that when the vocal plays,
say, I leave, I want you more of my bola.
It's a very, very nice way to control your reverb. Doing this actually makes your mix really, really clean, and you still get to feel the reverb, which is nice. Sometimes though, I recommend that you pull up the makeup gain so that you can actually hear the reverb, because obviously this is compression and this is going to definitely reduce the level of the reverb. But for this track, I didn't do that because I felt like this was good enough. And then let's look at the backup vocals. Pretty much the same thing, the pitch correction and gain staging on the main track, and then I routed all of these tracks to the background vocal bus. Actually, no, that's not true. First of all, I route it to the background vocal summing bus, which is this one here, where I have this multi-band compressor doing a bit of compression around 3K to 6K to sort of ensure that the background vocal sits below the lead vocal, right?
I want you more of my bola.
This is going to ensure that the background vocal is going to constantly sit below the lead vocals. And then from there, we've routed everything to the background vocal bus. The processing is sort of similar for the most part. We have a noise suppressor, we have a Keshoff EQ, to tame resonant frequencies, we have a DSR, Pretty much the same thing, except maybe the EQ can be a bit different from time to time. As you can see, I'm doing more boost on the highs.
She say, I leave, I want you more of my bola.
And that's because the background vocals are very low, and having the highs boosted that much gives it more presence because it's just like shiny. Do you understand what I'm saying? And then what else are we doing differently? As you can see, I'm cutting all the way down to -15 for the low mid around that same 750 kilohertz. Sorry, 750 hertz, not kilohertz. Sorry about that. I keep saying kilohertz. And then all the way down to -15 for around 200 hertz as well. You know, we have our compression. Again, the first one is to tame peaks. We have the multiband compression to keep the vocals tight and control harsh frequencies as well. And we have the LA2 for the main compression for the backup vocals. I do have an SPL here as well, but I've set the SR to the sides so that the S reduction is focused on the sides, which means the higher frequencies. So that way, even though we have all of that brightness, it's sort of controlled. Do you understand what I'm saying? And then we go to the time-based effects. You have the typical room reverb, but then we have a very big reverb send that is going to a very big reverb aux track, which has the Valhalla vintage verb. But just so you know, I have 3 reverb aux tracks and I'm blending 2 reverbs to get the sound that you're hearing on the background vocals essentially.
Want more of my bola.
That's a combination of the Neo verb and Valhalla vintage verb. It's just something that I like to do. It's not necessary you can actually get a great sounding reverb with just one particular reverb, but this is just something that I picked up and I thought it's nice and it works, so I do it from time to time. And then we have our delay. I'm using Nectar delay for the backup vocals. This is also a ping pong setup basically, because I have the left channel at 8 notes and the right at quarter note. Not much is happening there. And then the last thing we have here is this chorus send that's going to our chorus aux track that has the doubler. It's just something I like to do to add more width to the background vocals. And typically I would actually take down the center channel. So whatever we're sending to this doubler is just going to sit at extreme right and extreme left, you know. Pretty much that's everything we did for this record. As you can see, the record doesn't have a lot of elements to it. I probably mixed this song in like 30 minutes. Very, very easy song and very, very sweet song. Especially when the song is nice, it's easy to mix because you just enjoy yourself. And then let's go over to the mastering chain real quick. First thing we have here is this VU meter. This is just for me to monitor my levels and make sure I'm not sitting on the red.
She say, I leave, I want you more of my bola.
It's just nice to have something visual to show you that you have good headroom going to the rest of your mastering process. And then the next plugin here is the ozone. We're doing something that I do regularly here. I've set this to mid and sides, and what I'm doing essentially is just taming resonant frequencies. At this stage, I'm just nitpicking. I'm just listening for what I think is harsh.
My bola.
You know, something like that. And then let's move on to the next EQ here. And with this, I'm just doing a 1 dB boost around 60 Hz just to add a bit of punch to the low end generally.
She say, I leave.
Yeah, pretty much, you know. And then we'll move on to the E major. This is my favorite stereo E major because you have the option of setting crossover points. So that way you can spread the frequency range or make it narrow, right? You have more control essentially. But with most stereo major, once you just spread the song, everything is just going to spread out, including your low end. And you don't want your low end to spread out. Do you understand what I'm saying? You want to keep your low end tight. So what I'm doing here is more stereo widening around 8K and up, right? And then from the 2K to 8K, I'm not doing a lot of stereo widening there, as you can see. I don't touch the mid usually, just leave that alone. If I want to do any kind of sort of stereo imaging with the mid, I prefer to do it from the mix itself, which means do more panning if I need to. And then for the low frequencies, which is everything below 100 Hz, I like to keep that narrow. I like to keep that mono, right? That way you have a much more punchy low end. And then the next plugin here is the SPL PQ. This is where I come to sort of craft the final sound of the record in general. As you can see, I'm doing a boost up to 2 dB around 61 Hz, cut up to -1 dB around 200 Hz. Yeah. Not doing anything to the mids, and then I'm doing a boost up to 1 dB around 26 Hz. Sorry, 2.6K. Essentially. And then for the highs, I'm doing a boost up to 2 dB around 18 kilohertz. You know,
I want you more of my bola.
This is actually very, very important to how this record sounds. If we do a quick bypass, you would hear the difference that this is making. So let's do bypass.
say I leave, I want you more of my.
And then with the EQ.
She say I leave, I want you more of my bola.
Right, it's just clean, it's just very, very high definition. And then the next plugin here is the SPL Iron. This is where we do our final compression to sort of glue the entire record together. Typically I don't go more than -1 dB of gain reduction because you don't want to squash the song. I also like to do the high pass sidechain filter. As you can see, I'm doing that up to 91 Hz. So that way the compressor is not reacting to the key and you won't exactly be getting enough compression for the rest of the record. Do you understand? Like down the frequency range essentially.
She say I leave, I want you more.
So you can see -1 dB of gain reduction there. Very slow attack so that the transients are not affected at all, right? Slow attack, very fast release. It's mastering. So you want a very, very fast release for mastering. Very important. And then the next plugin here is the black box saturator for saturation essentially. I typically like to set this to flat. As you can see, when you set this to flat, you're going to have the saturation affecting all of the frequency range. High will focus the saturation on the higher frequency and low will focus the saturation on the lower frequency essentially. So saturation is set to 50%, pentode 50% going to the triode also at 50%. Bit of air is 40%, but most importantly, what I like to do with this is parallel processing. So as you can see, I've set the mix to 50%. We are basically blending 50% of the signal as it is with 50% of the saturated signal, and that's what's giving us the sound that you're currently hearing.
She say I leave, I want you more.
Quick AB as usual, so bypass.
She say I leave, I want you more
with the saturator.
She say I leave, I want you more of my bola.
That sounds very, very good. If I do say so myself. So the next plugin here is the BX Clipper. I typically like to do a bit of clipping before I hit the limiter, so I'm not doing a lot of heavy limiting. I like to set the ceiling to -2 dB here, knee to 5. I also like to set this to diode. Diode sounds a bit more warmer to me. So this is FET.
She say I leave, I want you more of my bola.
Okay, amazing here.
She say she want my touch, all over.
Right, I don't know if you can hear it, but diode sounds very, very warm and I really, really like that. So that's what we're doing here. Not much. I think we're doing about what we're doing.
She say I leave, I want you more of
yeah,
my.
so maximum 1 dB of reduction here. And then that leads us to the newfangled Elevate, which is my favorite limiter for mastering at the moment. Typically, I like to push this till I get about -4 dB of gain reduction, right?
She say I leave, I want you more of my bola. She say she want my touch,
But for this song, as you can see, we're actually just hitting around -3 dB there, which is actually not bad. And I like to set the adaptive gain to -6 dB. The adaptive gain works like a dynamic EQ in the sense that it sets the gain of each band differently to help you get a much more cleaner sound. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's actually quite cool. But the overall limiter gain for this record is set to -5 dB. The ceiling is set to -0.5. True peak limiting is turned off. I like to set the transient to 70%. Adaptive transient to 50%. Adaptive transient sort of works the same way adaptive gain works. And let's see where all of this is getting us in terms of LUFS and whatnot.
She say I leave, I want you more of my bola. She say she want my touch, all over. It's over. Game over, it's over. Every night she say she want to come sleep over.
So that's getting us to -8.9 or -9 dB LUFS and a true peak of 0.3, which is not bad. And also, I know I did not turn true peak limiting here. It's just something I stopped doing because when I used to use other limiters, the true peak limiting actually used to affect the transients just a little bit, the point where the whole song starts to sound just a bit dull. Do you understand what I'm saying? And sometimes you want your transient to be snappy and all of that, and true peak limiting kind of affects that negatively. But to be honest, in recent times, I've been using true peak limiting, especially with the newfangled Elevate, because it sounds good. I don't hear that sort of like blanket that you get over the song that I typically used to get with other limiters. So yeah, I think if you have this plugin, you should use true peak limiting, because with true peak limiting, we are going to drastically reduce the true peak that we are getting on the song. Let's actually try it and see what we're gonna get.
She say I leave, I want you more of my bola. She say she want my touch, all over.
So as you can see, we are getting -0.5 and with true peak limiting off.
She say I leave, I want you more of my Bola.
And with true peak limiting off, we're obviously going to end up with 0.3. Do you understand what I'm saying? So again, if you listen, the song sounded good. I couldn't really tell any difference with the true peak limiting on or off, especially with the newfangled Elevate. I would recommend trying true peak limiting. It doesn't affect the song negatively. So yeah, man, that's everything I did for the Sleepover record. This is a very dope record by Millie May. I'm going to leave a link below in case you want to check out the record, and please check out the record because it's a very, very dope record. All right, so that's going to be for now. I hope you got something for this, and if you did, as usual, make sure you leave me a like and subscribe to this channel so that we can continue to grow. And if you'd like to book my services for mixing and mastering, I'm going to leave a link below to the engineers page where you can book my services. And if you'd like to buy my vocal preset for Logic and FL Studio, as well as my mixing and mastering template for Logic Pro and Pro Tools, I'm going to leave a link below as well. FL guys, don't worry, I'm actually working on new lead and backup vocal presets for FL Studio that I think you guys will love. And I did one with stock plugins, okay, so that even if you're just starting out, you can use that. And I'm going to be giving out the stock plugin vocal preset for free, so you guys can, make some amazing music. All right, and the way I'm doing the presets this time around is a bit different. Before, my presets are actual presets that you have to install, but now I'm making them project files. So when you open it, it's straight into a project and you can just record your vocals and just keep going like that. You understand what I'm saying? So watch this space, make sure you like, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on all of those exciting things. All right, so that's going to be for now. I shall see you on the next one. Ben Macaulay out.
She say I leave, I want you more of my Bola. She say she want my touch, all over.